Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce Differently podcast. This week, we're talking about what happens to pets when couples separate. Now, for many people, a pet is far more than just an animal. They're really part of the family. So when the relationship breaks down, deciding who keeps the pet can become incredibly emotional. And what often surprises people is that the law doesn't always view pets in the same way that we do emotionally as their owners. In divorce proceedings, questions around ownership, care, and even time spent with a pet can be treated very differently from what many can expect. So, in today's episode, we're going to explore how the courts approach pets on divorce and some of the realities that separating couples need to be aware of. To talk about this, I've invited Estella Newbold-Brown. Estella is a partner and head of family at Lester Aldridge, and she advises high net worth clients on complex financial and children matters. She acts in cases involving significant wealth, international assets, and family businesses, and is known for her work as being strategic, pragmatic, and empathetic. A recognized specialist in pet disputes on separation, Estella regularly speaks at events, she appears in the media, and she's published a book recently called with Sadie Glover called A Practical Guide to Pets on Divorce for Family Lawyers. Estella, it's brilliant to have you here, to have such expertise in the room, in the virtual room. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
So this is a really interesting topic because it comes up quite regularly in divorce proceedings. And I think maybe we can start with the basis. How are pets treated in divorce in England and Wales? How do the courts look at pets? Do they see them as a member of the family or as an asset?
So it's actually really, really embarrassing about how pets are treated in England and Wales, because as I'll probably discuss with you later, we are so far behind in terms of other countries.
Yeah.
And what's really shocking, and I think people don't really realise, hence why we've established a working group, is that pets are treated as chattels. So
Mm.
there's no other defining factor to separate pets from the same as a pot, a car, a table, a chair. And, we don't have emotional attachments unless
No.
well, I'd hope not, to a table, chair, or your car. As we do to our pets. Pets are in
Yeah.
people's lives for decades, usually, if it's a dog, or a cat. If you've got a tortoise, they can
Yeah.
be a tortoise could outlive
They could
you.
outlive the owner. Absolutely.
Exactly. And it's really terrible how pets are treated. And the issue is that there is case law that has developed, but it hasn't developed in a way that really assists family law practitioners or our clients in
Yeah.
resolving the issue. So they are just treated as property, which means that the courts can make a property adjustment order. But
Hmm.
really, all that does is deal with kind of a transfer or the sale of a pet and dividing the sale proceeds between the couple, which I would
Wow.
say, yeah, that's just not satisfactory, especially where pets are so emotive
Absolutely.
and so many cases are derailed because there's an issue in respect of a pet.
Yes.
And you could ordinarily resolve the financial aspects of a divorce or from a separation of unmarried couples. But because it's so highly emotive and it's such an elephant in the room,
Yeah.
because they're unable to resolve it, it just really has a negative impact on the overall settlement.
That's really, yeah, that is shocking. Just to understand a bit better in terms of the process itself, then, does that mean that pets get dealt with through the financial proceedings rather than ch children, I guess? Because when there's children involved, there could be a direct relationship between where the pet lives and where the children live.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of children develop bonds
Hmm.
with their pets and with their animals. And there isn't a different system, no. So essentially, for married couples, everything is governed by the Matrimonial Causes Act.
Yeah.
So the courts really can only deal with it on a financial settlement. You would
Mm.
hope that because of that, clients put pets in there for me. But our
Yeah.
feedback from family lawyers is that people don't. And I think it's
Yeah.
because people don't view the pet as property.
Well,
So
yes, rightly
yeah, they
so.
just don't put it in the section of, I guess it would go in the section of assets over £500. People don't put their dog or their cat in there because they just
No.
don't view their pet as being, worth money.
Yeah.
There's an emotional attachment, but they don't see it as, pound signs.
Yes.
But also, what happens if you're gifted a pet by someone else, or you have rehomed a cat or a dog
Yeah.
from an animal sanctuary? You can't then quantify the animal, can you? Because
Yes.
you can't place a value. And also, I imagine, the depreciation of an animal, a
Oh God.
kitten.
Yeah.
A kitten is so much more expensive than a cat that's two
Yeah.
years. So yeah, so it's nuanced, but it's really complicated, and it's difficult. And for unmarried couples, equity follows the law. So whoever is the legal owner essentially is the owner of that animal.
Yeah.
And again, there can be massive disputes because people don't often look back at their relationship with the clarity that they had when they were in
Of
it.
course.
Often it
Yeah.
can be quite tainted, and they can rewrite the narrative of things that have happened.
Yeah.
And you can then have extensive civil litigation where costs become a real big issue.
And I guess people don't always think of it. I mean, I've got a cat. I don't think I've established legal ownership of it. I don't even know how I would do that. But
Yeah.
not everyone has thought of that and preempted the potential issue.
No, that's exactly it. And I think that when people have animals, you probably need to have conversations similar to when you have children, because I'm
Yeah.
sure people have conversations before having children about, do we want children? If we do, what's that going to look like? What kind of
Hmm.
parents do we want to be? Or, where are we going to live? What we're going to do? And it's the same with pets. I think dogs
Great.
slightly more because dogs need walking, once, twice, three times daily, depending on the breed. Cats are slightly easier because they
Yeah.
can be indoor cats, or you can have a cat flap and they can choose when they go out. But you probably need to have conversations early on about that. And then when you purchase your pet, you decide at that time how you're going to purchase it, how you're going to share those expenses, and really who would then be the owner, I guess,
Yeah.
in the event of a relationship breakdown. But I've heard stories. I've been talking to friends recently, actually. There was one who has a cat. Her
Yeah.
boyfriend moved in, and the cat's
Hmm.
totally chosen her boyfriend over
Oh
her.
my.
And it's yeah. And it's her cat. And she's just like, oh, he's gone away for work and now the cat loves me. It's great. But yeah, but that's the thing, you have to look at the bonding between the pet and the owners, but what's
Mhm.
right for that pet. And
Yeah.
Caris Nafty, so she's a dog behavioralist. She is part of our working group, the working group on pets and divorce and separation. And she told me stories where she's mediated a pet dispute,
Hmm.
and it was agreed that the pet, I think in this circumstance, would live with the wife. So
Okay.
the dog moved in with the wife because that's what they viewed as the best decision for the dog.
Okay.
And then the dog wasn't behaving well. It was peeing on the floor. It was chewing up furniture. It was doing this.
Oh.
So Caris really kind of was very involved and assessed the dog's behavior. And she said, well, actually, I know that you view this to be in the best interest of your dog, but given the behavior, actually, I think they would be better suited with the husband. So they
Mm.
trialed the dog living with the husband for a couple of weeks. And actually, that behavior went. There was no peeing, there was no chewing, and the dog settled. So actually, whilst we think we may know what's right, we need to
Yeah.
look at the behavior of
Yeah.
our pets to see actually what is in the best interests.
So that obviously in the context of mediating with somebody who's an expert, it would get looked at. But would the courts look at that if the matters ended up in front of a judge?
Sadly not. There are some cases on pets. Usually they're dog or horse related. I mean,
Okay.
most people own dogs. The stats are
Hmm.
really high with dogs, less so for horses, but I guess horses cost more.
Yes.
So people have the money to then argue over horses. And there's a case of SNS back in 2008.
Hmm.
And but these cases are so fact specific. And
Yeah.
in this case, the wife was unable to have children and she had three horses,
Okay.
and the husband was earning incredibly well as an investment banker, earning 200 300,000 a year.
Hmm.
Then basically said he wasn't able to earn that much anymore, so she lived and breathed her horses,
Hmm.
and she, didn't want a 9 to 5 job because then she wouldn't be around her horses. And these are all factors actually that the court took into account when
Okay.
looking at what her needs were, and that
Yeah.
was her needs for income, so maintenance
Yeah.
from her husband, and also to live in a property that was in a similar area to where she was
Yeah.
living at that moment with her horses, so
Yes.
that she could actually house the horses and look after them properly.
Yeah.
There was then a case of RK and RK from 2011. And what's really sad about this case, in my view, is that there are 4 paragraphs on a painting and one
Okay.
paragraph in respect of a dog.
Oh.
And the judge in this case basically said on, the latter issue in respect of the dog, and there were actually from memory 3 dogs, it was just one dog that was taken into account,
Okay.
is that it had been looked after principally by the husband. And because that was what was happening, the judge said, well, the husband should have the dog. It didn't even look at welfare, it just looked
Yeah.
at who had been looking after the dog, which isn't necessarily the best thing in those
True.
circumstances, as I've mentioned, with the work that Caris has done. And then there's other cases just where basically the judge in IX and IY from 2018, the judge was just like, oh, I can't deal with this. Can you just go to a mediator and arbitrator that
Oh,
deals with
really?
pets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would they
And that
look at who bought the dog or the cat? I mean, who was the actual person who purchased the asset? Would that be considered?
So yes, at the moment, the courts will, because we don't really have a set criteria of what should
Hmm.
happen. The
Hmm.
court's kind of starting point, I guess, is to look at who bought the pet, like who is registered at the vets, who pays for the insurance, who pays for the vets, who pays for if you're going away on a holiday, like
Yeah.
boarding for the animal, or someone visiting the cat to clean out the cat litter and feed the cat, etc. So the courts take that into account. But the trouble is we have 2 different ways of dealing with it. We've got the family courts where it's discretionary. You've got
Yeah.
Section 25 factors, and the courts, have this, ability to make a property adjustment order.
Yeah.
But because of the discretion, as we've seen with these cases, and I'll come on to Fido in a bit, which is one of the most, brilliant cases in respect of pets, there's discretion there. So essentially, the
Yeah.
courts can look at lots of factors, but in civil proceedings, the courts are really going to stick to the legal title, and I
Hmm.
think they're going to be less able to look at welfare. And the trouble is, we don't really have a lot of case law on it, which is why
Yeah.
the working group say there should be a change in law, in statute. But Fido is one of the best cases that we have to help us. But the trouble is, it's a first instance decision,
Yeah.
so by district judge back in 2024. So it's not binding, but
Yeah.
with this case, again, so fact specific. You had a husband and wife that had been separated for 18 months, and essentially the husband tried to kidnap their
Oh,
dog. It was I
okay.
know it's terrible, a golden retriever, and he actually brought civil proceedings and tried to deal with it in the divorce proceedings.
Yeah.
But the judge found that he kind of was very inconsistent with his position. He tried to say it was like a disability dog to help him, and it was found actually it wasn't.
Okay.
But he actually like ran after the dog, tried to steal it, dragged it into his car
Oh,
when the
goodness.
grandmother was out walking the dog, scuffed all of its paws. It's terrible.
Oh,
I know it's
God.
terrible.
That's
And the judge
violent.
I know,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And violence is actually quite a key thing when it comes to pet disputes, because often, if there's a coercive control or abuse in the relationship, there's often abuse with an animal,
Yeah,
and
that's
one
true.
kind of feeds into the other, and it's a form of control.
Yeah,
And dealing with pets in this way is a way to weaponize pets,
absolutely.
as well. But the judge found in this case that actually the wife and the children all pooled together their money with the husband to buy the animal. And the judge found, it was District Judge Crisp, found in this case that actually the wife looking after the dog for the 18 months preceding the court case was a
Yeah.
really relevant factor when looking at
Okay,
who
because the
is
dog was
best.
settled, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where the dog ran back to the family home after the husband tried to steal her, they viewed that she viewed that the family home as her place of
Yeah.
safety, as a place
Hmm.
of security. But you're not going to have pets running off choosing
Yeah.
between homes or
No,
choosing
just
between
put them somewhere in the
owners.
middle and see
I
which way they go.
I know. And also, if someone's got a dog treat in their pocket, of course the dog's going to run to them. So how do you test for all of these things?
Yeah.
And you're not going to have cases where you've got all of the same facts. Everything is so nuanced in family, and it's so
Yeah.
different, and it's so fact specific. And also it depends on the breed. Dogs behave in such different ways, that it's really, really difficult. So it's very fact specific, which is
Yeah.
why there needs to be clear law set out on what should
Yeah.
happen.
And this is screaming out to me negotiations rather than going to court because it's such a roll of the dice from what you're saying.
Yeah,
And so for those who manage to, go to mediation or at least have some form of negotiation, can they agree a shared agreement arrangement like you would with children, a shared care arrangement? How does that work? Do couples have complete freedom with regards to that?
well, essentially they do. If there's a dispute between them in respect of their pet, as we've seen, I don't think a judge wants to be involved with it
Yeah,
because it's similar to cases, arguing over who gets the cutlery set or who gets the china bunnies. Judges just, there's backlogging in the courts. Judges just don't have the capacity to deal with these sorts of issues. And
yeah,
if we've got a case where they say go away and sort it out yourself, that's what the courts will encourage. And I don't think they're going to then unpick anything that the couples have agreed between them. And I would say that, everything, I'm a member of resolution. I really believe in keeping things outside of court, looking at non-court dispute resolution, keeping things amicable. And I really would encourage couples to try and sort all of this out themselves. If they decide that a shared care arrangement is what's best,
hmm,
then that's what they should do. However, it may not necessarily be the best thing for their pet.
yeah,
Karis Nafty, our dog behavioralist, actually said it's better for a dog to be in one location rather than being shared.
yeah,
However, it depends, if a dog has been doing that their entire life. I mean, my sister shares her dog with my dad, and the
yeah,
dog goes between both of them. And Tilly is now, I think she's about 16. She's been doing it her whole life, and actually she's very happy with that.
yeah.
And if she had shown any signs of distress, they would have completely re-looked at this arrangement.
Hmm.
But for some dogs, it really is counterproductive to them, and it can really distress them.
Yeah,
But if a couple do decide that that's what they want to do, then I really would encourage them having a pet nut to set out what the agreement is that's been reached between them. Because, as we know, and you probably deal with as well, Chloe, couples, we really encourage things to be as amicable as possible. But sometimes if there's a new partner that's brought in, that you've separated, but your your
yeah,
your ex-partner has a new partner, it can sometimes change the dynamics of your relationship.
absolutely.
Or if they have a child, and
Or a new
what
pet.
oh, a new pet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, Carrie said often where in a family, if the wife, for instance, keeps the pet or the husband or whoever, the other parent usually gets another pet if they've got
Yes, yeah,
children.
yeah.
And because I'm actually in the process of writing a children's book about two
Oh,
homes and
yes.
there being a family dog and what
Hmm.
happens with that family
Yes.
dog. And I don't want to give away the punchline, or although I may have already, like, massive spoiler alert. But that's really, really common. And she said that that's a common thing that she finds when she
Yes.
helps families deal with who should be looking after
Yeah.
the pet when there's a dispute.
And it's interesting because I often hear it raised as an issue with regards to the children, because the children are often attached to the pets. And there's also this sense that during this time of turmoil and change, it is good for the children to have the pet with them and to have that support. But looking at it from the perspective of the welfare of the animal, is something that I think tends to come at in second place in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of people tying the care of the pet to the care of the children? So literally with the pet going back and forth the same way the children would.
Yeah, yeah. So that's, I think that the children, because children are should be, and they probably are, the first thought of parents in a relationship breakdown, then the children come first. And then
Yeah.
if an animal is linked with that child, I think they just automatically attach them. But
Yeah.
that may not be the best thing for that pet. I don't
Yes.
think you can apply the same rules for children that you can for animals.
Yeah.
And, there is the Children's Act. So there's a, completely separate statute dealing with welfare in
Hmm.
respect of children.
Yeah.
We are not saying, as the working group, that pets are the same as children, because they are not, but they
Hmm.
are just more than a pot or a
Yes.
table,
There's a middle
you
ground.
know? Um, so there should be welfare taken into account, and you should look at the bond between the owner
Hmm.
and the animal, and the children and the animal, but the connection with the child shouldn't be the only factor that you take
Yeah.
into account. There are other factors to take into account.
Yeah.
But again, I think if people are uncertain, then that's when a dog behavioralist will be really, really helpful,
Yeah.
because they can then assess the relationship and the way that that dog or cat or whatever animal is behaving, and what
Yeah.
would be the best for them.
Absolutely. So I guess to wrap up, it'd be great to have a bit of a nutshell version of a lot of the tips you've shared. What would you share as a top three tips for people who are separating or going through divorce and are unsure about what to do with their pets?
So I think that the first thing is that if you are unsure what to do, that you need to get advice from, a dog behavioralist, or sit down with your partner to have discussions about what you think you should be doing. Avoid court, don't go to court, because as we've seen, there's inconsistency in how things are
Yeah.
dealt with. And you need to make sure that you are taking into account welfare, because welfare isn't being taken into account by the courts at the
Good.
moment. And, if you look at other countries, they're so more advanced than us. Germany has been looking at, who's best to be the primary carer, with who can meet the pet's needs, since 2002. New Zealand
Hmm.
had a case back in 1978 where
Oh,
two
wow.
chihuahuas remained together.
Hmm.
So they're very leading there. Romania been looking at dealing with things since 2023, and it's who would best care for the pet, feed the pet, walk them,
Yeah.
things like that. British Columbia changed their rules in 2023, Australia in 2025, and I would say pull in some of the welfare principles from Australia. So it would look at, who acquired the animal, so who paid for them. That's one
Yeah.
consideration. But who has possession of that animal when you're looking at your dispute?
Yeah.
Because as we've seen in Fido, the wife looked after the dog 18 months before, and that was actually quite a key factor. And
Yeah.
the extent of your ability to care for that pet
Of
properly and
course.
pay
Yeah.
for them if there's been any violence, because obviously, like Fido, there was violence
Yeah.
towards the pet. And if someone's going to be violent, they're not going to be the best person to look after them. The attachment, which we've looked at, and just the ability to provide the most, I think Caris says, the most enriched life for that pet. And I
Yeah.
think that they would be the best person. So I would say welfare is a factor. And lastly, just make sure that any agreement that you have reached is very clear and is set out either in the consent order if you're going through
Hmm.
a divorce, in any court order or separation agreement if you're unmarried, or have
Yeah.
a pet nap.
Yeah.
I love pet naps. I love drafting pet naps. Have a pet nap to clearly
Yeah.
set out what the arrangements are, so it's really clear, so that if there are any issues in the future, you've got a document that
Yeah.
really clearly sets out the ownership and the arrangements.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, that's the ideal, right? Is to address it up front and to not have to deal with it at the time of separation. If you've made that agreement already, then it takes away a lot
Absolutely.
of the tension at that point.
100%, and have those difficult conversations early on
Yeah.
to then avoid any issues further down the line. I think it's really important to be open about this. And if you are buying a dog, you are buying a cat or any other animal, these animals are in our lives for decades and for a really
Yes,
long time. And it's a massive commitment to give that animal and for the and back, bringing an
absolutely.
animal into your home, this has been taken away from their family and they're coming in and they'll love being with you, but it's a big thing for them. So I
Yeah.
think everyone needs to treat it with the respect that it should be given.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Estella. I will put a link to your book in the notes. So, for
Thank
those
you.
who are interested in buying it to find out more, I'm sure it will be incredibly helpful. And of course, people can reach out to you. I will put your email address if anyone is going through separation and struggling with these kind of arrangements. You're the person
Thank
to
you so
speak to.
much. Oh, thank you. It's been lovely.
Thanks so much, Estella. Have a good day.
Thank you, and you.
Bye.